Thank you everybody for joining us. Welcome to our Flights of Foundry panel on developing developing a critical voice. It'll be discussing how at its best, formal criticism is an art form on its own, with the voice of the critic conveying their insights and observations in a way that can transform their audience's experiences. So how do you become a critic? What are some techniques and approaches for developing taste and cultivating its evolution? I do want to put out there that also if people, attendees have questions, if you put them in the chat, I'll try to work those into the discussion if we can. So feel free to put your questions in at any time. Why don't we go ahead and just let everybody introduce themselves. Again, my name is Jason Sanford. I'm actually mainly a fiction writer, short fiction and long fiction. My novel, Plague Birds, is out now. I'll promote it. It's a finalist for the Philip K. Dick Award and currently a finalist for the Nebula Award. So I also do a lot of short fiction writing, but I have dabbled in criticism and I do read it and love it deeply. So Jana, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Jana Bianchi. I'm a writer, editor, and translator. I'm from Brazil. So my main job is like I translate for a living. I translate from English and Spanish into Portuguese. So I work with like publishing houses here in Brazil. But I also have a magazine that publishes short stories in Portuguese for Brazilian audiences, fantasy and science fiction short stories and flash fictions. And I'm also a podcaster in a writing podcast. So we talk about lots of things. And sometimes I write some critiques for a publishing house here in Brazil, one of the biggest ones that publishes fantasy and science fiction. And I also worked for some time like doing some, I don't know how to say that in English, like critical readings for indie authors. So they would send me the manuscript and I would read and make my comments. So that's it.
Oh, great, great. Brada Lees, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Brada Lisa and I go by he they pronouns. I I'm a short fiction and long form fiction writer, even though right now I'm writing a lot of nonfiction these days, not just criticism and essays. Oh, I have a chapbook out. I mean, I have a forthcoming chapbook called Cookie Song, which is going to come out in late 2023 from Mason Jar Press. It's a cross-genre work. And for who I write mainly for the Geekery. And even though I have some reviews and essays on Pomegranate Magazine and Sage Cigarettes, and right now I have reviews forthcoming for Capstone Books.
Kurt?
Hi, my name's Kurt Pankow. I write mostly silly stories about robots. I've had fiction published in Daily Science Fiction, Escape Pod, handful of anthologies, various and sundry places. I lead a local writing discussion and critique circle here in St. Louis, and have been doing so for about 10 years. And so lots of experience giving critiques, especially to newer authors, and then the discussion often involves a lot of just analysis of storytelling, fundamentals and mechanics, and building out discussions or presentations around those.
Well, to get the discussion going, as you know, we're human beings, and every human has opinions. Everyone and a lot of people like to express those opinions. But what is the difference between just expressing your opinion and actually developing a critical voice with regards to literature or any other critique you're making?
That's hard, right?
I'm sorry, I throw the bomb out first. I'm sorry.
It's good. But I think maybe the main thing here is that writing is a craft. So, of course, you will always have an opinion on something because it's also an art. So, probably it's like not, we can just say it's good or it's bad. There's more things that we should talk about, some a work to we shouldn't classify that as simple as that, good or bad or whatever, worth it or not worth in reading. but I think that it's a craft. So I think there is like some tools that we could see if they have been properly used. I think also there is a context in the word in which the work fits. So that's why sometimes when you're talking about works that were published many years ago, we should like take that it was in another context. And also if you read something written in our times, the same thing we would evaluate it or comment about it like differently. So I think this is a balance that you need to find. I also think that it's not a problem when you have an opinion and you put it like clearly, this is my opinion, this is not for me, or but I can see these are like strong points or weak points and things like that. So I think this is a balance, but we should take in account that it's a craft and an art at the same time, a writing piece.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in next. The thing about opinions is that no one's opinion is wrong. When you're especially, gathering feedback for a piece or something like that, you're going to get a lot of opinions, and they're going to disagree with each other, and that's fine. An honest reaction is still useful feedback. Whereas when you get into criticism, it's much less about, how do I react to this than it's less about is this working for me, and much more about what is or is not working. Because the critic is not just trying to give a thumbs up or thumbs down, but really to understand, especially if you're giving feedback directly to the creator, what it is that isn't working, why these things aren't working, and that can be deceptive. I mean, a lot of times we like things or we don't like things for reasons that we don't really internalize. And so I think a big part of being critical is being able to get beneath just that reaction and try to really grok where it's coming from.
Brother Lees?
Yeah, for me, an opinion, other than this is good, this is bad, it's for me, opinion is something like this personally resonated with me. Um, but when it comes to critical, which is questioning what conversation is this work contributing to either today or in the past, and if they're and knowing what's the context, the social context or the cultural context, whether it's a work that's published here in your area or country, or is it published overseas.
Yeah.
So I think yeah, that's what I say.
No, I agree with I agree with that and what everybody's saying. I like, but yeah, the to me the critic is trying to not just give the hey, I'm on Goodreads and I'm going to give it a 1 to 5 stars for and give a short summary of why I like or didn't like it. Our critics trying to not only bring awareness to works and all that, but also trying to talk about the works in the larger cultural and sociological context of what's going on. Um, there's and that can also include you know pointing out that hey, there's biases going on, there's issues going on, perhaps with some works, not with others, or perhaps pointing out that hey, this work is very focused on one culture but it's excluding other cultural aspects. So how does the how do you how as a critic how are you able to be evaluate and be aware of our biases while analyzing or reviewing, especially in the context that the genre is global, but in many ways is still dominated by the United States, even though, let's be honest, science fiction and fantasy is popular around the whole world. But it seems like, people seem to, at least in the United States, they can be rather limited. So how does the critic handle all of that? I think I threw another big one out. Sorry.
Yeah, I would say that it's hard
Yeah,
to.
I should mention my superpower is like bringing conversations to a stop with these type of things like this. Like,
No,
okay,
there are amazing questions, but yes, they're really complex. I think as I said, like I work mainly in the Brazilian market. However, I'm starting to write in English and publish in English. Like I have a couple of publications, Part for Fireside, but then it was like a huge shock to me to start like sending stories abroad, like for me abroad, because for the first, I was aware that there were a bias, like that people would read my work differently from other people from Brazil. I knew about that, but it's different to have this first impact, let's say like that. Um, so I think this is very hard because we should um, our context and our origins and our background, they make who we are, and many things are we don't think about it before judging. We judge like in a kind of automatic way. So I think that in order to try to evaluate things with the as little as a bias that's not that big, you should first be aware that you will have this, you will be biased by, you can't be biased. So you, when you know that, I think things are better already, because you kind of are more, you try to be more careful, I think, maybe on checking things. Maybe also when you know that, you can research and even ask people, not, if not the creator, you can ask other people that belong to the same community to see if something makes sense to the community as a whole. But also I think this one important thing to say is that although we should try not to read things uh, just like without taking in consideration the whole context, the market and the audience will be expecting something. So there are things like pre-established there. So at the same time, we should bring this conversation and say that some things maybe like be more complex than it seems. It also is an experience that people will be reading and having when they read something. So I think there's also a balance, because you cannot just say, okay, this is something, this was written in another country, so I will just ignore everything that the audience will be expecting, and then it's okay. We don't need to criticize that. So I think it's also a balance. So very complex.
Uh, yeah, I can. I agree with a lot of what Jana was saying. I think there's a. I think coming from my perspective, where I'm a middle-aged straight white guy. I only know about cultures apart from my own because I seek them out, and so that is, that's an important part of it, is to read queer literature, to watch movies from other countries. And even then, that's, I feel like in a lot of these ways, I have a pretty good grounding for knowing that there's something that I may have a bias around. But like, I saw the movie Encanto and I loved it, and it felt like it was a really good depiction of Colombian culture, but like I can't say that authoritatively. And so my first question is, well, I wonder what people that are from Colombia think about this. And so yeah, that's my approach, is to try to broaden the pool of entertainment or even like non-entertaining media that I consume, as a way to just kind of get my antenna up there. But then when you encounter something that is part of a different culture, or referencing a different culture, seek out people that are more knowledgeable than you with regard to that culture.
Radalise?
Mhm. So these days I do a lot of webcomic reviews on the Geekerary, and most of them are South Korean webtoons. And also I read manga, I watch anime, and I'm guilty of this too, but back then I consume these things from a Western lens. I'm Puerto Rican, I'm white presenting, so obviously I have biases, and I still am unlearning them. I'm still evaluating how I think about this piece of media that's not in my country or not part of my culture or my experiences. And I'm not going to name certain platforms, but I keep seeing people reviewing anime webtoons or any other media from other countries through a Western lens, someone then would say, "Oh, this is feminist, this is empowering," or they will critic something like, "Oh, why this person in love with their first cousin?" and 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 it's really important to evaluate how we think about media outside of our experiences and our countries and cultures. And this is it doesn't matter the genre, even if it's fantasy and science fiction from another culture or country, the creators are going to slip in their mannerisms, their cultural context into it. And obviously there are many examples like popular anime like Full Metal Alchemist, and also the magical girl anime Puella Magi Madoka Magica that came out in 2011. And during that time, a lot of Western feminists, mostly white, were saying that it was anti-feminist, that it wasn't empowering. The main character sacrificed herself. That's a spoiler. But feminists and women in Japan think differently about what's empowering, what's considered feminist for them. And I also the same when I'm reviewing South Korean webtoons. I read a lot of romance fantasy, the villainous subgenre of isekai, and I when I read them, I I remind myself that this is from another country, another culture, so there's going to be different views on gender, sexuality, social aspects. So that's a big advice that I will give to any emerging critic or anyone who has been creating has been doing critiques and reviews and analysis of certain media from other countries.
I agree with that. One thing I was going to bring in, but I think we've just kind of discussed it. There was the Pixar film recently, Turning Red, was released, and there was a controversy when a reviewer from Cineblend, Sean O'Connell, wrote that he couldn't connect with the film because it was limiting, because it was focused on a Chinese immigrant family in growing up, a young lady growing up in Toronto, and he couldn't connect with that and all that, and it was total BS. Anyone who's, I'm like, no, you didn't, so he, and you want to just reach out and just scream at him like, excuse me, so what, you don't see that how other works can, just don't get me going on him. But he got a lot of pushback for that. And I think part of the problem is that many critics try to be the authoritative voice on what is and is not good and successful and part of, should be part of the canon, so to speak. And I think so. I'd like to discuss that, and also because to me, I think a critic should approach their criticism from the point that they will not know everything. They need to come, to be. You're not going to know everything about every culture. You're not going to know everything about that's being created. And how do we get past the idea that critics should be the gatekeepers of literature or whatever they're critiquing?
I would like make a comment about the last point, but I think it totally connects with that. We are talking about social issues and things that we are aware already that they are like more complex than they seem. But I recently was talking to a friend and we realized that small things, smaller things that I didn't think would be like a problem, I realized it was. So, as an example, in Brazil, we had a Brazilian dictatorship in the 60s until the 80s. So, our relationship to military is totally different from the US relationship to military. So, you are like, there's the respect by the veterans, and I can understand that. But for us, the military is the enemy, because I know I'm not talking about individuals. Of course, there are good people in the military forces, but for us, there is this kind of resent. We resent them because of the dictatorship, and it was pretty recent. So it ended in the 80s. I was, my parents were there, my uncles and aunts were there. They were beaten by military. So I think like, and then we talked about it because my friend wrote a story, and like there was a couple of people in a group in a forum in the internet where you can, submit your stories and people comment on them, being quite offended because the vision of the military was like, okay, they are the enemy, and they were, look, not all the military are like this, and we need to explain that. So as you said, like, you can't know everything about every place, but I think that's a good point, is, as you said, like, not approaching it as if you were somebody that knows more than other person. So that's what I like when we say in terms like, this doesn't resonate to me, oh, this is not for me, this is not something I would like to read. Of course, you can point specific things that sound wrong for you, or not, if not wrong, sounds strange. But it's also a good if it sounds very strange to you, I think it's a good red flag, so you can, talk to people, as we were talking, talk to people that are related to that community, or that could explain to you if there's some background that you can see, a historical background or social background. But I think that the tone that you use usually is even more important than the content. So in my magazine, when we use it to send feedback to people, we don't anymore. We don't do that anymore because it's a lot of material. But we had like a platform in which we made comments for each author, for all the editors. But when you will be sending the feedback to people, we would rewrite the feedback in a way that was, polite and also kind and also respectful. Not that we were not respectful and we're talking about among ourselves, but I think that the form of the critique is very important too. So if you don't go there and say things in a way that you assume you are the one who knows more, it's already a good start.
Yeah.
I
Ladies? Oh, sorry. I was
Go ahead. No, that's fine.
either one.
Okay. My perspective is slightly different on this in that my audience is generally other creators, either giving them direct feedback back about their work or trying to do an analysis of work in order to help other people improve their craft. Um, so so the whole critics as gatekeepers is not something that I interact with a lot, although I mean, obviously, I do have and share opinions about things, but my perspective is much less about gatekeeping and much more about celebrating. Um, let's find the good things that maybe other people are overlooking.
Great.
That's much more interesting to me.
Yeah.
I've been thinking. I was thinking about gatekeeping, and this is the first time I ever thought of this because I think I don't believe in gatekeeping because, you know, I read a lot of analysis and critical essays online about movies and franchises like the Alien franchise. Also, someone told me certain analysis of Game of Thrones. I mean, there's so much interpretation of media, and I just don't believe that there's going to be one opinion. I mean, everybody has different analysis, even queer ones and gender ones that other people won't see. But so yeah.
No, not, and I should clarify, I actually hate gatekeeping. It's just I know there has been a trend, and sometimes critics seem to be doing gatekeeping, and I think that, with the way the genre is these days, it's so many different um, communities coming together. You have the anime, you may have someone who loves science fiction and fantasy, anime and manga, which intersects with the gaming communities, which intersects with the written, and then the TV, people who love TV and all that. So I just love how, like the idea that critics can help, bring attention to works that have been overlooked or and all that. I just, that's to me is what I look for when I'm reading criticism, but it can also help me understand a work I'm going to read or have read. I've read critiques before. I've read a book, read a critique, then gone back and reread the book and seen it in a totally different light. which is, and it's an amazing thing when criticism is done in that way. So how can a critic transform the audience's experience in your ideal? Let's go for the ideal of what can a critic do, and how can a critic, if try to really show an audience a different side of something they think they already know, perhaps.
So I'll jump on this because I have opinions. Um, I I think some of my favorite bits of criticism, particularly film criticism, have been around pieces that are misunderstood, that really do a deep dive into what's going on behind them. I'm a huge fan of Dan Olson's videos, and he had one on Annihilation that was a reaction, the movie, I should specifically the movie Annihilation, that was kind of a reaction to all of these think pieces that were like the end of Annihilation explained, and going into the fact, just going into details that this is a movie that is not really about telling the story in the narrative. It's really about exploring themes through the narrative, and that those things that are thematically important are just a lot more upfront in the way that that story is told. And that is something that is not typical for Hollywood movies. And and so yeah, like that kind of video, I love that kind of thing, where someone has a familiarization with the material, and some good insight into storytelling, is able to show you the things that you might have missed, but not just like all of those Easter eggs in the background that anybody can point out. And those and part of this has to do with just sort of the critical landscape right now, because we don't, if we want to find out if a movie is good, we don't put on Ebert and Roper, we go to Rotten Tomatoes. And so we're seeing an aggregation. There's a lot of criticism, and it's very spread out and dispersed. And so I think that incentivizes a lot of outlets to have a strong opinion fast, rather than to have a well thought out opinion, that is going to have to seek an audience. So that's my perspective.
I can go. Nobody
Yes,
else.
yes.
So the way I see it, is personally, I want my readers to view media in new and unbiased ways, and to contribute to whatever conversation is going on, um, and to also I also I actively seek out critics from countries and cultures, and I refer to them to my readers so they can see, so they can watch media, especially anime, manga, and webtoons, and avoid the Western gaze.
Yeah.
And I as for example, I want to shout out to Ayumi Shinosaki. She does the podcast Sparkle Shy Chats, and she's from Japan. She's been raised in the culture, and she's very knowledgeable, not just in anime but the cultural and social context. And she mainly does magical girl anime. I will post the link on Discord, but I always like these days I always seek out critics from the countries that I'm reviewing media for, because I want to avoid the mistake of letting my biases slip in, and also ethnocentrism, neoliberal views, and Western privilege. And I want my readers to realize that, whether they're critics or not.
It's good. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that like sometimes if you instead of like if you have a critique that hasn't like a conclusion but show important things of the work, and you don't need to change the opinion of somebody reading the review if they read the book or watch the movie. But I think that I like when the critique makes like you see something not as as we were saying, something good or something bad. I can still, I don't know, I watched the movie and I didn't like it, but I see that are good things that were done, that are good themes discussed, and then maybe I didn't realize it because I was like focused on my experience of like watching or reading the book and not liking. But after when I read the critique, I think we can think afterwards. And as I said, like I think we tend to, as you said, like about the critics being very fast because they need to go out as soon as possible. Instead of having things that conclude, oh, this is good or this is bad, I think we should like go for things that make you think about, and maybe if you like it, you can rethink. You can still like it, but you can see problems, and as an example. And the opposite is also true. You didn't like it, but when you read something that points out some strengths, you can see, oh, okay, there are nice things here that, okay, I think they could have done differently, but they are nice. They were like good things done. So I think it's when the critique doesn't change my opinion, but made me realize that is there's more in the work than I could see when I first watched or read it. I think it's a nice critique in general.
I wanted to put out to people, how does writing criticism tie into, because I think lot of critics in the genre also they may write criticism or but they also are writing maybe fiction and fan fiction, all that. How does it all tie in together as a creative? So you critique a work. Does that help you understand what you're then trying to do for your own work? Um, does it hinder your own work? I'm just curious, throwing that out there.
Well, I think anyone that has ever read Slush for a literary magazine will tell you that that is the best way to improve your own writing because you will immediately see a lot of what people do badly. Um, I and again, my perspective coming from this is about presenting criticism to other creators, either about their work or about something in the culture. And I think it is immensely useful to be able to point at something and say, here's a story we've all seen that most of us really enjoyed. What about it worked? Or here's a story that is fairly not loved. What about it is not working? Because once you get into diagnosing those things and figuring out the underlying fundamentals. Um, you know, Man of Steel is a very technically correct, well shot, well acted, well directed movie, but it's not particularly entertaining because it's very thematically incoherent. But that's not obvious on a first watch. You just watch it and you're like, well, I saw a lot of stuff and I don't know how I feel about that. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of value as a creator in almost doing just a post-mortem of other works. And this can be, works that are great, works that are solidly mediocre, works that are hot garbage. I think there's a lot you can learn from that.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that also is a way of like when we talk about our own work, we have the emotional attachment to that. So, and sometimes we know that there is something wrong with something we are writing or we are whatever producing, but we can't pinpoint what exactly it is. So I think that when you see the same problem in the work of other people, you can maybe oh, okay, that's it. So you can kind of do the correlation and maybe go back to your own work and try to change it. So I think it's Kurt say like, oh, you see what people do bad. That's true, but you also see what people do like that, catch your attention and as soon as you start reading. So this is also, I think something that I think you can use in your own work. So especially when you're doing like slush, because there are many specific things that are quick things to decide if that should be sent to another editor or something like that. So yes, I learn a lot from reading from a magazine, and I think it's a very nice way of like developing your own craft.
So, so back then, even during my days in MFA in creative writing, I was very negative about negative criticism, and I thought that was going to hinder my work. I wasn't a very good writer then, and I didn't really think highly of my thesis, to be honest. But when I start really doing critical essays and reviews for the February before my personal blog, I found that it really has helped my work, and it continues to really help my work. I I'm not only aware of my biases, but I'm aware of how storytelling works. I mean, other than being a writer, I'm also starting to draw and doing some cartooning. I hope to have at least maybe write a webcomic or maybe even draw. And yeah, that's pretty much my take.
Just speaking as a fiction writer, yeah, I get to, I love criticism of my works, but I don't accept all criticism. I listen to it all, but sometimes I'm like, if it doesn't resonate with me, I'm not going to see what I can do with it. But then it's weird putting out when you start publishing works, I now get critiques from and reviews from people I don't know, and it's like, and sometimes I'm like, wow, that was a hurtful review. And then I'm looking at it, well, they probably, maybe that, I don't know, sometimes so, and sometimes it seems like, um, criticism, sometimes it gets very personal. You're like, wow, is that critic personally attacking me? And so how do you set as a critic, how do you handle that when people go, um, well, okay, I'm gonna put this out. I write a column called Genre Grapevine. Last year, I wrote a critique of the Bain Books uh, forums where they were hosting a lot of violent rhetoric. And I tried to be I was like, okay, I'm not trying to accuse Bain Books of anything. I'm not trying to, I'm just trying to say, here's what's going on. I think it needs to be addressed. And people just came at me saying, I mean, the level of harassment and nastiness, like you're trying to do all this. I'm like, no, I was just, hey, there's a problem here. That's all I was pointing out. So how do you, as a critic, how do you handle how do you keep it from getting personal, and how do you handle when someone comes after you, and throwing that out there?
I'd like to go first.
Okay.
Um, so so when I look at a media that I'm uncomfortable with, or I'm not sure about, or I just don't like, I try to look at it as a reparative reading, like what is not working. And I really do this for Western or American media. I look at it, what is the creator's intention, and how could I approach this without indicting anyone's theory, or have people online misinterpret what I'm trying to say.
Cool. Jenna, Kurt.
Uh, I am historically terrible at this. In my writing group, there is a long-running joke. So, you know, they talk about when you're giving critiques to people, you try to sandwich the bad in between a couple of good things. And I was fairly notorious for starting off a critique with, well, it's not the worst thing I've ever read, thinking that that counted as a good thing. And I have not done this for the better part of a decade, and I still hear about it routinely. In terms of like being proactively better about that, I make it a very you always have to make sure that you're critiquing the piece and not the author, and trying to talk about how the piece is making me feel, and then um, a, a lot of it is just being honest that this is my reaction, not this is trash, but this didn't work for me. And just making it clear that you're talking about your response to a piece um, rather than how you think it ought to have been. So.
Yeah, exactly. I was in Clarion West 2021. I was from the 2021 class, and we talk a lot about like the help build format of critique, in which you are like using words that are, as Kurt said, like it doesn't work for me, but it doesn't mean it is necessarily bad. Also, you could like try. Yes, I think try if you need to do that personal in any way, you do that about you, not about the author. So this is not something for me. Or even, I don't know, maybe I'm not in the mood to read that, maybe you're not, I don't know, you're not in a good day and things like more violent or more you need closer reading that you can't make at the moment. So I think that the way, as we were saying in other questions, the way you put the critiques usually even more, I wouldn't say important, but I think it's more the impact of how you put things are higher than the what you're saying itself. And even if you take care and you are polite and you say things like, as I said, like making sure that the author know that it's not personal, and they take it personal, so then you can do anything else. I think people are humans, as just Jesus started the panel, so maybe people react badly, and there's, I think, no way that you can prevent it. So
I wanted to see if there was any questions from the audience. Again, if you have a question, throw it into the chat and we'll do our best to answer it. Do any of you have a point you'd like to raise or anything? I don't think we really got to dig down into the biases and criticisms, recognizing your own biases and how criticism can vary in different cultures around the world. I'd love to hear views on that if someone's interested, or if there's another topic you want to cover.
One thing I would say very, very quickly is just that the real benefit of criticism is, like I was saying at the beginning, much more about diagnosis than about just identifying good from bad. And so the things that are not working about a story are frequently not obvious. My wife and I were watching Wonder Woman a couple of years ago, and the movie was working for me, and it was not working for her, and she is going through all of these nitpicky little things about the plot and whatnot, and I'm like, nothing that you're saying is wrong, but that's not why you don't like the movie. And being able to kind of get past the surface level stuff and really understand how things work and how themes and character arcs and world building are actually much more resonant than plots and characters and setting. So
There's a question
Yes.
about a few simple rules for offering good criticism. And for me, I actually practiced this for the last few years, and I feel like I am slightly improving each time. Is to, when you write a review or a critical essay, is to make sure that it's coherent, you are that you are following a thread of idea or ideas throughout. I mean, if you're interested in submitting to media outlets or websites or blogs, it's really important that when you draft it, that it's organized and that readers can understand your point.
That's good. And let's see, I saw a few more. First of all, I do want to confirm, we'll continue the discussion in the Discord, and we'll share that. And I know Radalise has shared some links already on Discord. Someone said, as a slush reader, what would you say are some of the most common mistakes you see from otherwise competent writers getting down into the nuts and bolts, so to speak? Any thoughts on that? I mean, aside, I'm gonna throw that out. I haven't done slush in so long, I can't remember off the top of my head.
Same here.
the best piece of advice I ever got on this came from Ben Kinney of Escape Pod, which was like, if 3 paragraphs in I don't know what the main character is and what either their goal or their stakes are, I'm not going to keep reading.
yeah, I would say more or less the same thing, because for me it's like sometimes people don't start a story where it should, let's use this expression between quotation marks, start. So you can see that like 3 paragraphs ahead, the start is in the point that you'd like to start reading. So I usually I take a special care with my stories, like trimming the beginning and the ending, because I think that in the beginning you're still trying to understand what you're writing about. And sometimes these first paragraphs are just, you trying to figure out what you're talking about. So
We have another question on the chat. Someone asked that said that critic opinions sometimes seem to be at odds with fan opinions of massively popular story. What's going on with that? I have views too I can start with if y'all want, but
yeah, I think that if you're talking about adaptations from books to movies or from books to series, there's a problem there because people usually expect the book to be exact, the movie or the series to be exact like the book, and sometimes the adaptation is an amazing work, but people don't understand that. So I think it's one of the, if you understand that's adaptation and you can see how good they adapt the story to another media, you can like it more than those who are expecting to see exactly the book how it was, or the comic book in a movie format, something like that.
I think media diet's a big part of it too. Professional critics, uh, book critics read a lot more books than most people. Movie critics watch a lot more movies. Things that are going to feel trite and overdone to them may very well still feel new and fresh to contemporary audiences.
yeah, I think that's actually an issue. I agree with what both of you are saying. I mean, different um, something that works, for example, a short story that works amazing. It's just the best short story you've ever read in that format. You turn it into a TV show or a movie, and it doesn't, it's a different medium. The medium matters. The medium truly matters because different storytelling rules and different ways, things that work well in one medium may not transfer over. So, that's why you can have people like, I love the book, but hated the movie. Although I've had reverses, I've had some, I'm like, the book was stunk, but the movie was great. And yeah, I think the media diet does, I think when people read a ton of books, they get a bit pickier, and that's a personal thing, just it's not saying that you can't love, you know, this one manga, but someone who's read like almost every manga that's ever existed may be like, oh, I've read that 20 times, So and they're both valid responses. We've got a few minutes to wrap up. Any other thoughts y'all want to throw out before we wrap up?
There was one question there in the chat about a few simple rules to offer good criticism. One of my go-tos is be descriptive rather than proscriptive, and I already touched on this a little bit, but it's much more, how are you reacting, not how would you have done it differently? There's my one simple rule.
Anybody else? Well, why don't we go ahead and just share parting thoughts and everything. And again, if you have any works you want to share, websites or where people can, and we please do share where people can find your criticism and our other works. Well, Bradalise, why don't we start with you?
I already placed them on the Discord, but I have since January last year, I have written a ton of reviews. I used to review books, but right now I am mainly focusing on webcomics and also I am doing book reviews elsewhere. I have a couple of reviews for upcoming capstone books, and I'm also writing a few reviews for Chase cigarettes. Yeah, and I also sorry, I also do right now I'm doing anime reviews on my personal blog.
Cool. Yeah, and I will say we'll make sure that everyone shares all this stuff on the Discord. So if you can find the links there, we'll definitely share everything there. Jana?
Yeah, everything that I write is in Portuguese for Brazilian audiences, but I'm like very active in Twitter, so I'm always tweeting about translation and books. I tweet mostly in Portuguese, but there's the handy tool to translate the tweets. So I just leave my handle here. It's Jana P Bianchi. I just leave it here. And thank you for the conversation. It was really nice.
That's really good. Kurt?
Yeah, I'm very SEOable. KurtPankow.com. I tweet at KurtPankow. My blog is a lot of cultural criticism, and every other week I'm posting. I do a blog series every year, and right now this is me remembering old video games, and so I post that every other week, and then just stuff that I'm thinking about. But a lot of it is media criticism. And if you're in the St. Louis area and are interested in a writing group, we're on Meetup, the St. Louis Writers Meetup. So.
Well, thank you, everybody. I really enjoyed the discussion. Again, we'll continue it on Discord in the Spire channel, SPIRE. Check it out there. We'll share links and continue answering questions there. And so otherwise, we're going to wrap it up. We hit the time limit. So y'all, everyone, it's very nice to meet all of you. And I look forward to reading more of your criticism and talking to you more in the future.
Nice to meet you all.
Bye-bye.